are waiting for a few more people, but you're more than welcome to get started if you'd like.
Let's give it a minute or two before we start so that everybody can filtering in. I hope wherever you are that you had an as beautiful day as we had here in Worcester. It was a gorgeous fall day. I don't know where you're all localized and what part of the country or abroad, but I hope you had a good day today. We certainly had a very nice day.
I will say nklein@aischool.org, I believe, is a student I met earlier this week from the Atlanta International School. So if it's you, hello, I'm glad that you were able to join today.
Okay, hello everybody. I hope you can see the presentation. If not, Gio, let me know, but I would like to start. So welcome to our event today. My name is Arne Gericke. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at WPI. I have been for 10 years the department head, and I'm moved on last summer to be Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies. So I will be able to answer lots of questions you may have, but in particular, obviously, my goal is to inform you about the WPI Chemistry and Biochemistry Department. And I wish we could do this in person on our beautiful campus, but on the other hand, some of you might be also far away, so this remote version is probably the best option for you. So this shows the faculty in our department, and what I would like to stress right out of the gate is that we have faculty in all relevant areas of the chemistry and biochemistry discipline. So we have specialists in physical chemistry, analytical chemistry, organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, and biochemistry. And the advantage for you is that you will be taught the respective classes by specialists in their respective areas. And the department is accredited by both of the primary organizations that serve chemistry and biochemistry. On one side, the American Chemical Society, and on the other end, the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. And we are actually one of a fairly small group of departments which have actually accreditation from both organizations. And what it tells you that the curriculum we are teaching you meets the standards put forth, or actually exceeds the standards put forth by these organizations. And it essentially assures you that what we are teaching you is at the level that is expected, and that you have good chances then to move on to your next step, whatever the next step might be. WPI is obviously a highly ranked institution, but probably the part which we value the most of the rankings, and rankings always have to be viewed a little bit with a grain of salt, but the one thing which I feel best encapsulates who we are is a Wall Street Journal ranking where they found that we are #1 in where great research meets great teaching. And that is how I would define WPI. We want you to be involved in research. We have outstanding faculty in terms of teaching and in terms of research. And you will benefit from both sides of that medal. And we really, and I cannot stress this enough, we really encourage everybody to get involved in research in addition to the classrooms as early as possible. This is a picture which shows our main teaching facilities. So our classrooms, laboratories are very modern. They have been renovated. It's now something like a little bit more than 10 years ago, but they are still in excellent shape. And one thing what I would stress is sort of here on the lower left, the picture which shows one of our instrument suites. And what you see here are 7 stations, which each consists of a infrared spectrometer, a gas chromatograph, and a UV-Vis spectrometer. And WPI teaches a lot of the laboratory classes in a project-based settings. And in order to be able to do that, we need to have the right instrumentation in place so that there's not one instrument and there's a big line in front of it and one person is doing something and everybody else watches. That's not our philosophy. We want you to get hands-on experience with the different instrumentation, and therefore we build small groups of 2 to 3 students, and you would work on these stations. Obviously, we have in all our laboratories, including our general chemistry laboratory, hoods all the way around, and that allows us to teach you really all forms of chemistry in a safe environment. Safety is an important goal of teaching chemistry. So in addition to teaching you the right techniques and how you protect yourself, we also ensure that you do it in the appropriate environment, meaning in a hood. And as a result, we are not limited as to what we can do in even our general chemistry sequence, which is obviously the starting sequence for the chemistry labs. So I already alluded to it. WPI teaches most classes through project-based education. This is what we stand for. WPI has several projects that I will talk about in a minute that are built into our curriculum. But in addition to that, each and every class has a project-based component. And in particular for a discipline like chemistry, that is important because research is not a prescribed thing where you get sort of a description of a particular experiment, like a recipe, and you work through it and then you're there. Research is that you come up with a experimental design. Obviously, you first come up with a question you would like to answer or a hypothesis. You then design the experiment, you carry out the experiment, you learn from it, and you troubleshoot the experiment, and you analyze the data and so forth. And that is exactly how we teach even in our most basic classes, meaning in general chemistry. The majority of our lecture classes are associated with laboratory courses. We believe that chemistry is an experimental profession and that you need to be in the lab as much as possible. And therefore, we have, as you will see in a minute, more lab hours per week than typically at other chemistry and biochemistry program. So you will obtain training in using high-end instrumentation, like for example here on the lower left, you have a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer. You probably have heard of MRIs. MRIs are essentially nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometers or imaging devices for us humans or for animals. A NMR is the same thing, simply for a molecule, and it's a standard technique for any kind of synthesis, whether this is organic synthesis or inorganic synthesis. And you would work yourself with a NMR that is dedicated to teaching only. So you really have access to high-end instrumentation, also like atomic absorption spectrometer, gas chromatographic mass spectrometry, and many other HPLCs and so on and so forth. So to dwell a little bit on the project-based education, in the first year, freshman year, you have on the chemistry side of things, the general chemistry lab series. And then in the general education, you have the great problem seminar, which is built around the main challenges that face humanities in these days. They are being identified by the national academies, and we have built several seminars around that so that you get right out of the gate exposed to carrying out projects. In the second year, you will then transition to the chemistry experimental lab series, so that those are advanced lab in, as you will see, instrumental analysis, organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, and physical chemistry. And in the general education, you will work on your humanities and arts project. And at WPI, we place quite an emphasis on making sure that you get a well-rounded education that goes beyond only science and technology. We are trying to teach you science and technology in a societal context, because obviously our doing as scientists has a direct impact on society, and we should always reflect upon that, whether what we are doing is actually to the benefit or detriment of society, and what are the ramifications of what we are doing. And we believe that is an important component of educating a well-rounded scientist. In the third year, we have the biochemistry lab series, and on the chemistry side of things, and on the general university education side of things is the interactive qualifying project. The interactive qualifying project is a project that is carried out typically over a term, and in most cases at a project center outside Worcester, very often outside the United States. We have, I believe it's now 42 project centers around the world, and you would go there and you carry out projects that are given to us typically by NGOs or other organizations at that site where that project center is. And these project centers are really everywhere there within the United States. In Worcester, we have one in Bar Harbor, we have one in Washington, and other places. And then around the world, like Copenhagen, Zurich, London, Hong Kong, Beijing, Moscow, and Cape Town, and so on. And they always have a theme around which these projects are being developed, and you carry them out. And there are different things you're learning. Obviously, you learn to apply some of your knowledge to a project that is given to you to the benefit of the society you're in. So when you're, for example, in, let's say, Nigeria, you would carry out a project there which benefits the society there. And it really runs the gamut what it is. In addition to that, of doing something good and understanding how science, engineering, and technology can help society, you also learn a lot of soft skills, like working to a deadline, presenting in front of a professional audience, which is the sponsor of your project, doing this in written and oral form, working in an interdisciplinary team. When you go these days into chemical industries or pharmaceutical industries, you will be in all likelihood working in a interdisciplinary team, and you have to learn how to work across disciplinary boundaries and find the right language for the group you're working with. In the fourth year, we have a major qualifying project that is, in other words, a senior thesis project in your major. So you would carry out a project which would take at least one full term, 7 weeks. Most students spread this out over all 4 terms of their senior year. And that is a very substantive body of work that leads obviously to the thesis, but very often also to a publication in an international journal. I'm writing, for example, right now a paper with a student who finished a MQP thesis last academic year. And before I continue, I want to mention, feel free to post question in the Q&A block. So you find at the bottom of the Zoom window, you find the Q&A button, and feel free to post questions there, and I will keep an eye on it and will answer the questions as I'm going along. I would like to talk a little bit about the content of our lab series. So as I said, in the first year, you have typically in every biochemistry program, you have the general chemistry series, which is in our case a lecture lab series. And also there, we already start to do project-based experiments. So you are given a problem, and rather than us giving you a recipe, you have to find a solution how to answer that problem, to design an experiment, carry out the experiment, potentially troubleshooting the experiment, and then reporting on the experiment. So really like a normal research projects. It's an open lab format. We teach it twice a week, which is already more than what you find typically in other chemistry programs, which general chemistry labs typically are once a week. And we really allow you also to make mistakes and learn from them. And for that, we have a one day of the week, which is, we don't teach regular labs. You could come in, and if you had problems with an experiment, you go in and we do the experiment, and hopefully be then successful. But that allows us to also challenge you at a much higher level, because in the past, it was always necessary to give experiments. The students were definitely able to finish in a 2 to 3 hour time block, so that you could write a lab report and so on. And with our new format, we can give you much more challenging things than one could normally do. And what is shown here is an example which is actually done already in week 2 or 3 of you after your arrival at WPI, which is the synthesis of gold nanoparticles, which are functionalized with some organic molecules. And gold nanoparticles will fluoresce at different wavelengths depending on their size. So this is different size gold nanoparticles, and as a result of their size differences, they emit the fluorescence at different wavelengths. And this is sort of the corresponding spectra for the different sizes. You see a 2 nanometer gold nanoparticle emits more in the blue range, and then as the gold nanoparticle gets larger, it starts emitting towards the red. And you can use that to analyze actually the size of the gold nanoparticles, and you can from there then troubleshoot the experiments.
Professor, we have a question in the Q&A from one of the students, and they say that they know that the biochemistry program is heavy on the chemistry side. Is the curriculum flexible enough for the student to be in the biochemistry program while leaning their coursework towards the biology side more than the chemistry side?
Yes. So the biochemistry degree, and in comparison to the chemistry degree, has a little bit less chemistry, and instead we added also mandatory biology courses like cell biology, and obviously the biochemistry classes. And both degrees, chemistry and biochemistry, gives you ample opportunities for adding electives in addition to that. And many of our students are actually majoring in biochemistry and then minoring in biology, or even double majoring in both disciplines is a very common combination. Another combination which is used very often is biochemistry and bioinformatics. As you probably know, bioinformatics becomes increasingly important both in biology and in biochemistry, and this is an interdisciplinary program between both departments. And I recommend often to our students to minor in bioinformatics in addition to biochemistry. Equally, on the chemistry side of things, we see major-minor combination with chemical engineering very often for obvious reasons. So there it's typically the minor, not major, because of the ABET requirements for the engineering degree program, that becomes a lot of work. And and anything else. We have students who are majoring in chemistry or biochemistry and minoring in business. We have students who are minoring in data science, so they are interested in learning how to mining big data sets, for example. So the general answer is yes, in both degree programs, there's lots of opportunities to venture out to neighboring departments. For the chemistry series, then the lab series in the second year is initially analytical instrumentational chemistry. So there you need learn all the gas chromatographic techniques like HPLC, GC, and things like atomic absorption spectroscopy, advanced infrared spectroscopy, advanced fluorescence spectroscopy, and so on. You're moving on then as the chemist, not as the biochemist, to physical chemistry. There you learn things to measure physical quantities, like, for example, what's shown here is a calorimeter, which measures the heat evolution of a chemical reaction. You learn the foundations of advanced spectroscopies like vibrational rotational spectroscopy, so infrared spectroscopy, Raman spectroscopy, and so on. For both the chemistry and biochemistry degree program, you need to take an organic chemistry lab, which is shown at the bottom left. So you synthesized advanced organic chemical molecules and then analyze them using a range of techniques like nuclear magnetic resonance, infrared spectroscopy, and other spectroscopy like UV-Vis and so on. And the capstone is then of that year is the inorganic chemistry, which is also a synthetic lab. Same idea, you're synthesizing advanced molecules, and all of these labs are organized around projects that teach you, as you execute this project, teach you the experimental methods. In the third year, we then have the biochemistry lab series. Some students already start with that in the second year, depending on how much AP credit they transferred in and where they are. So on one hand, we have the protein structure function lab, which deals with expressing proteins, learning to manipulate proteins, running gel, running Western blots, and analyzing these proteins with other methods, circular dichroism, and so on and so forth. And then the next lab is genetic engineering. There you manipulate a DNA, and then with that manipulated DNA, you then express a protein, and you do a range of other manipulation. We are teaching now CRISPR there, which is a technique you probably have heard about. And then we have a new lab, which we start actually in this semester, which is not on that list yet, which is named Biophotonics, which is a lab directed at teaching you techniques that are utilizing and broadly defined light techniques to interrogate biological material. So there are things like cell counters, but also very advanced microscopy. So for example, we build there microscopes on a rail and teach you all the microscope part. Essentially, you're building your own confocal microscope, and you learn a range of techniques to analyze using photonics, biological material, and obviously we end with sort of very advanced microscopy, cell biology kind of techniques. So I've talked already about the facilities we have for teaching available. WPI is a research university, and your benefit as an undergraduate student is that you will be able to participate in the research in our labs. For example, I'm funded by the National Science Foundation and by the National Institutes of Health. My research area is studying lipid-mediated protein functions, in particular phosphoinositide lipid-mediated protein functions, which are lipids that have been implicated in a broad range of disease states. Not only implicated, they have been found to be disease-causing. So for example, one protein we are working on is one of the most important tumor suppressor proteins in the human body, and a major driver of human cancer. For example, in case of breast cancer, about 40% of breast cancer originated from a mutation in that protein. Colon cancer, somewhere 50%. Prostate cancer also, and all the other cancers. I don't want to go for each and every one, but you get the idea. So what typically happens in my lab, that students are joining already in their freshman year, very often my lab, and they get trained, and they then become increasingly independent as they go through the 4 years of education, and at the end actually operate at the level of a beginning graduate student or even already advanced graduate student. And to give you an idea, I have instrumentation in my lab. If I sum up the dollar amount, is something like in the neighborhood of $2 to $2.5 million. And undergraduate students use all of this equipment. I mean, some is shown over here. This is a surface plasma resonance spectrometer. Here we have an advanced microscope. In my lab, for example, we are using a lot of advanced microscopy, so confocal microscopy, total internal reflection fluorescence microscopy, fluorescence lifetime imaging microscopy, and so on and so forth. This here shows the autosampler of an NMR. I mean, you get the idea. Independent of what research group you are joining a group where you learn very advanced techniques. More importantly, you're immersed in a research group consisting of other undergraduate students, graduate students, postdoctoral associates, and your faculty mentor. And in that setting, you're not only learning a lot of science, you learn also a lot about how to steer your career and to understand what you want to do next. And last but not least, at some point you will ask, or you will need letters of recommendation for your next step. If you have worked in a research group for many years, that colleague will be able to provide you with a very detailed letter. And that's a letter which actually then matters as you submit it to wherever you want to go next. This shows somewhat the research opportunities in the department. On the material side of things, we have colleagues working on something which is named metal organic frameworks, which is a substance that can host other molecules. We work in the area of systems biology, structure and function of proteins. We have colleagues in the area of energy production, so those is physical chemistry, cell signaling, so that's where, for example, I'm working in. We work on drug delivery. Remember, that's a big topic. We just all learned this in the context of the COVID mRNA vaccines, which are packaged in a lipid nanoparticle to get it into the body and to have it functional. So drug delivery is important. We have a colleague working on viral cancer therapies, which lately have gotten a lot of attention. And we have a lot of synthetic group in the area of organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry. So whatever your interest is, you will be able to find a good home to do some research. I already talked about the major qualifying project, which is a senior thesis project, which you carry out in a research group in close collaboration with the students in that group, and you present your research. Sometimes that research ends up in a peer-reviewed journal. I publish with undergraduates in all kinds of journals, very respectable journals, very often biophysical journal or journal of biochemistry, and so on. In addition to that, we also have opportunities for you to go to conferences and present your research there in front of professionals. In addition to being able to carry out your senior thesis project at WPI, you can also do this at the nearby UMass Medical School, which is approximately 5-minute car drive from WPI. We have a shuttle service over there that you can get to their campus. And there are many more faculty who are always eager to accept WPI students into their research groups and to carry out research with them, even including Craig Mello, who received the Nobel Prize for mRNAs, regularly accepts WPI students into his research group. So we have a portal there, a web portal. You go there, you see who over at the medical school is looking for students, and then you can apply there also way before your senior thesis project, and you get invited for an interview, and then you take it from there. We have summer fellowships available for WPI students to work in the research labs. That is obviously a great opportunity rather than having to work at some burger place, let's say. You can actually do research and get paid for that. And we are very grateful to David Lepre, who was he's now retired vice president and head of global operation at Roche Genentech. He's a WPI alumni, and he endowed several positions. And in addition to that, we all have in our research grants also positioned for undergraduate students to work with us. I have also a position available in my research grant to send students over to Germany, where I'm originally from, to work there at a Max Planck Institute over the summer on a project which I'm pursuing jointly with them. So there are lots of opportunities also in the summer. That's the shortcut of this slide. How do you choose and when do you choose an NQP advisor? Many of our students already noted it, get involved in research very early on, already as early as the freshman year, and that then naturally runs into then the senior thesis project. But you can always go on our websites and see what we are doing, or on the website of the medical school, and see what interests you, and then you set up an interview with that colleague, and then you take it from there. This somewhat shows that all the disciplines chemists and biochemists are employed in addition to research in industries, there are many other traditional and non-traditional areas chemists get involved in. And in general, the employment status for chemists is very good. It's a mature discipline. In the moment, biochemists, forgive me the word, are flying off the shelf because the bio and tech industry in Massachusetts is running red hot. And it's very easy to find a job, whether you want to go straight from your bachelor's to a job, or you go and move on to a PhD, which I will be talking in a minute about. And that shows you sort of the salary levels. And I would stress these are the salary levels after at the beginning or after a year or two in that position. So you have been very well paid as a chemist or biochemist. Many of our students move on to obtain advanced degrees in terms of PhD, and I want to stress this right away. In science, when you want to pursue a doctorate, you can do this essentially for free, because you get admitted with a graduate assistantship, which pays salary. At WPI, we pay the students give or take 25,000, but most importantly, you get free tuition and health insurance. So you can get an advanced degree without your parents having to pay more for the tuition. And the best students move on to the best graduate programs. I mean, I had a student graduating from my group last year, and she got admitted to Berkeley, Stanford, Caltech, Columbia, Harvard, MIT, and Brown. Doesn't get much better than that. And that tells you the scope. So it really depends on you, what you make out of your time at WPI and your education. And if you do well, you will be well set up for the next step, including going to industry. Those students who go straight to industry at WPI, about 98% of all students have found their next step after graduation at July 1st. That's an incredible number, which speaks to the performance of our Career Development Center, which works very well with those students who go straight to industry. But it also tells you something about the value of a WPI degree. So sort of to bring it home, WPI really prepares you for the real world. That's our goal, whatever the real world will be for you, meaning what's your next step and what you're planning to do. And here we show Emma Palmacci. She got actually after WPI a PhD at MIT, but then moved into something which is quite different. She's now doing more project planning and working for Raytheon. Is not actually chemistry related as much. And that shows you sort of the non-traditional path some chemists choose to go, because it's simply, there was an opportunity and she latched onto it. I also want to mention teacher prep program. You can actually get at WPI a license within 4 years. You get the initial license, and it's quite fitting into a normal education. We have actually for that scholarships available specifically for those of you who are interested in pursuing that. It's very lucrative, $20,000 per year for 2 years. It's an NSF grant we secured last year, and it will be still valid for you guys. It runs for 5 years. And I also want to make a comment about pre-med, pre-farm, and so on. We have a special pre-health advisor who works hand in hand with the departments. Our medical school, the students who are destined for medical school are able to get into very, very good schools. We work with them from day one to make sure that they have everything in place the way it's supposed to be. And the biochemistry degree is actually the only degree that gives you all the requirements for medical school. So you don't have to put a single class on top of that in order to fulfill the medical school requirements, for those of you who are interested in that. This is Jocelyn Mendes. She got last year a very prestigious grant from the National Science Foundation, a graduate research fellowship program. That is a grant that is kicking in after WPI. Once she moves on to graduate school, we regularly help students apply for these grants, because obviously if they get this grant awarded, they have money in their hand. And guess what? Every graduate program in the country wants them, because it's essentially a freebie. And so she moved on to a excellent graduate school. It escapes me right now which one she ended up choosing. She was also pretty much admitted everywhere of the top schools. And so that's another way of us working with our students. And with that, I want to finish. And John McDonald couldn't make it today, and instead I will put my email in the chat. So feel free to copy it down and reach out to me if you have more questions, but I'm obviously also happy to answer questions you may have right now.
I think you only sent the email, or the email address, to me and the panelists, Professor.
Oh, okay, sorry, never mind. Let's do this again, everyone. Here we go. You must have questions, concerns. Maybe parents have questions.
Yes, as folks are writing their questions down, I also dropped my email in the chat. If you need anything, I'm one of the admissions counselors in the Office of Admissions, and I'm willing to answer any questions you may have about that process.
So, you know, my son is now a senior, and you know, what I told him when he was sort of trying to figure out which institution to go to, and he's studying something we don't offer at WPI, so he found a way to get away from his father. But what I told him is, every institution you're going to, where you listen to a presentation like this one, you should ask, what are they particularly proud of? What do they stand for? And then you should ask yourself, is that something that is relevant and important to me? So WPI is all about project-based education, hands-on education, getting you into scenarios that are very much research-like. And if that's something that speaks to you, then WPI is the right institution for you. If that's something that does not speak to you, then it's not. And and you should always ask yourself as you go to these information sessions, is this something I can see myself? Because the institution you're going to, that will be your home for 4 years. And you want to be comfortable there in terms of the other people who are there, the other students, the faculty. And I know it's much harder to figure this one out via Zoom. It's much easier when you're really on campus, and I hope that you all will have the opportunity, if you're admitted, to come in spring to visit our days for admitted students. But that's essentially the question you have to ask yourself, and that might help you a little bit to figure things out. My other advice is, as you are in the senior year, look out for scholarships that become available you can apply to. It's sometimes only $500 or $1,000, and it doesn't seem like the whole lot. But if you apply for several of those, you get 1, 2, or 3. That already helps your parents enormously as they are trying to finance your tuition. In addition, obviously, to get do a good job in your senior year when you're applying here and apply to WPI and get a good scholarship here. But every dollar counts, and every dollar also helps you as you are talking with your parents and trying to figure out which institution fits best in both ways, financially and intellectually, because both sides of the equation have to be met.
We do have a question, Professor, probably the last question we'll be able to answer tonight. It says, what type of experiments or projects are done in the genetic engineering class? Sounds very interesting. Also, how does pre-dental tie into this major too?
So with respect to the what kind of experiments are being done, I mean, you learn how to mutate DNA and try to put something in there that is new. So for example, one project I remember, I'm not teaching that class, so I don't know every project they did, but they implanted in a piece of DNA a protein that is resulting in a smell. So it has a smell, and so they took a protein that has no odor to a protein that had an odor, and it's obviously easy to detect. That's why they did it. So you learn how to manipulate exactly to put in a snippet that changes the properties. At the same time, also when it comes to CRISPR, we are teaching you how to use the basic of CRISPR. CRISPR is actually a fairly easy technique. It's a genius idea, but to do it is actually not that complicated. And again, to change properties of a cell or proteins. And ultimately, what you do is a very large part determined by yourself. What you're identifying a goal, and then you talk with the instructor, is that generally doable with the techniques we have available, and then you go for it. And so it's that lab looks different from year to year. It really depends what students have, what kind of ideas they have. In terms of pre-dental, it's the same thing. You get advised a pre-health advisor, and they guide you through the entire path. Again, biochemistry is an excellent preparation for dental school. And I think one question disappeared.
I had a question about whether international students had limits on research, and
there are no limitations. There are where there are some limitations sometimes is some federal grants we bring in have some limitation in terms of fellowships, but we also make sure that we have a good number of fellowships available that have no limitation attached to it and are not only directed at US citizens or green card holders. So the answer Gio gave is correct. There are no limitation whatsoever.
All right, so it looks like we came to the 6:45 mark. We appreciate you, Professor, for joining us today and I learned a lot about biochemistry. I didn't know much about it, but now I can confidently go on the road and sell your program even more. For the students, thank you so much for joining us. As Professor mentioned, we have our email addresses, so please do not hesitate to reach out to us.
Thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
Have a good evening, folks.
Bye.